So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our July Breakfast Club. My name is Zoe Bowles. I'm one of the steering group members, along with Minoti, who will be presenting today. So we're really happy to bring this mindfulness session to you. I'm sure we've all felt recently that our lives, our work lives and personal lives have blurred lines slightly. So mindfulness is a great way to keep those two separate and establish a balance. So that's perfect. Okay, next slide. So as always, we'd like to just run through our code of conduct before we begin. So the initial thing to mention is these Zoom sessions are recorded. We'd like to make sure that we can publish these on our YouTube for anybody who's unable to attend the event. So if you would rather not be included, please feel free to stop your video. And that just maintains a certain amount of confidentiality that of course you can decide on. This will be more of an interactive session. I can't imagine it'll be more about private stories, but despite that, we want to make sure that anything that is raised that is particularly personal remains within the circle. So please try to respect people's boundaries and keep any of these personal stories as confidential as possible. So thank you. As Minoti mentioned, we like to promote as much engagement as we can. So we will be using the chat function to raise any questions or any comments that you have throughout the session. We will be having a panel today. So you will have the opportunity to pose any questions that you might have on the topic of mindfulness. And finally, we like to ensure that everybody is present during the sessions. So we like to ensure that you can offer each other support. Obviously, from the panel perspective, we can give you our opinions, but please feel free in the chat function to offer recommendations or any advice that you may have. So this is it, so wonderful, thank you. And I'll introduce Minoti to the session.
Thanks very much, Zoe. And yeah, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. So today's session is really all about talking about mindfulness, sharing our own interpretations around the practice, understanding how we can pursue our hobbies, our passions to practice mindfulness. And of course, hopefully by the end of this session, feel a lot more positive, a lot more inspired. We've got an amazing three ladies who've joined us as panelists. Sorry, I'm just admitting somebody. And we will be introducing them in a short while. But before that, I thought it might be important to tell you a little bit about this strange lady who's been yapping away about Zoom functionalities. So I am Minoti Parikh, and I am the founder of TPL Experiences. So through my business, we deliver programs that improve the well-being, productivity, and confidence of teams. I've been doing this since 15 years. I've presented and facilitated over 1,600 such training programs. But what most of you will not know is that in my previous life, when I was in India, I was a sports presenter. I had my own television show running on Star Sports, which is the biggest sports channel in India. It has millions and millions of viewers. And I was running my own show for 7 years. I had quite a high profile, stressful, very, very busy life. I've worked with the likes of the President and the Prime Minister of India. And of course, as you would imagine, that all that has led to, at some point, me feeling absolutely burnt out. And that was not it. I thought I'll give myself an even bigger challenge. And I decided to leave all that fame and glory and all that and marry the man of my dreams. Well, at least at that point, I thought he was the man of my dreams. And relocate to England. And as you can imagine, it was a complete shock to the system because I did not anticipate this whole feeling lost and feeling like I didn't have any identity, I didn't have any purpose. So I think at that point, for me, it became very important to reignite my passion for Indian classical dance, something that I used to learn when I was a child, but I gave it up for various reasons. And I thought that through this whole process of me starting my life all over again, I think that dance has played a massive role in allowing me to feel like I belong to this country, to the city, to feel like I can create my own identity. I can possibly create my own life here as a business, as an entrepreneur. So for me, I think I have great, I think, passion for not just for tapping into dance to help with my mindfulness and my overall well-being, but I'm also very passionate about discussing this with people and sharing that, you know, there are lots of ways of practicing mindfulness. And that's why really it's that much more special to me. But before we get on and get our panelists to share their stories and their journeys, I thought, let's take a couple of minutes to possibly start from the basics, because I appreciate that all of us on this call might be at different points in our journey of realizing our practice. So we're going to basically start with the basics of talking about what is mindfulness. And mindfulness basically is the quality of allowing yourself to be present in that very moment. It's about giving yourself permission to completely engage in that specific activity. And it can be anything and everything, as long as we are present in that moment, as long as it is giving us the space that is just for us, for our own happiness. That really is what mindfulness is all about. I think the other thing that I want to also touch on is what is not mindfulness. So mindfulness is not just about meditation. Meditation can be a form of mindfulness, but it is not only about meditation. It's not about, you know, sitting in this awkward yoga position for us together somewhere in the middle of the jungle. I mean, it can be that, don't get me wrong, it can be that if that works for you, but it's not just that. It's not a religion, and it's basically, it's the power in you to create your own interpretation of what makes you happy, what gives you a space to feel positive and feel relaxed. And I think what we are going to be doing through this entire 60-75 minutes is basically discuss how we can help ourselves feel more positive, feel more at peace, and how that can help us with our overall well-being. And like I mentioned in the in the description, that we will be practicing some bits as well. So I'm thinking that how about we start this session by actually practicing a short mindfulness exercise. So bear with me. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically set our intentions for today, for this event, and hopefully for the rest of the weekend as well. So what I would like all of us to do, we've got two options. Either we can look at the lovely image in front of us and try and focus our attention to it, draw our awareness to that image. Or if you're like me, if you prefer to close your eyes to get that concentration, to get that focus, then please feel free to do that as well. If you feel slightly awkward to have your cameras on and your eyes closed, then more than happy for you to switch off your video for the next couple of minutes. Basically, the next couple of minutes is your space. We're trying to create a space where you feel calm and relaxed. So whatever makes that space comfortable for you, please feel free to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to just start off by asking all of you all to just try and focus on the way we are sitting. Let's try and make sure that we're in a nice, comfortable posture. And now if I could request you to just take a couple of breaths here, nice and easy. And now let's look at this space in front of us. And now let's imagine something. You know, we all have this one bag, you know, this one handbag that's there in our wardrobe somewhere. We never use it, never. But we don't throw it out as well, because we always tell ourselves that at some point, I'm going to use it. So maybe today, just imagine that you've got that bag out and you have placed it in front of you. Now imagine you're opening the zip. And now, with full intent, complete focus, let's try and dump in every distraction that we have. All the unread emails, the pending calls, the food that we need to cook later on, all those thoughts, all those distractions, those anxieties, that stress. Imagine it's all being dumped into that bag, one after the other. And now let's imagine we've got this ugly padlock. Let's take that padlock out. Let's zip this bag. Let's lock it. Let's lift it. And imagine we're throwing that bag out of our space, that space in front of us. And now, with that space looking completely blank, let's take a few seconds to set our intention, to allow ourselves to just be in this very moment, to allow ourselves to stop checking our phone screens, to stop sliding our desktop to another browser, just being here. And let's promise ourselves to try and be happy, to try and feel grateful, to try and feel positive for the next 90 minutes and hopefully for the rest of your day as well. Let's physically say no to anxiety, stress, anxiousness, and say yes to positivity, to happiness, to just being yourself. And if you'll have any other intention you'll want to set, please feel free to do that. And after you've done that, Let's take a nice breath in from the nose and a nice breath out from your mouth. And let's, whenever you're ready, let's open our eyes and shake it off a little. And hopefully feel better, feel more at sync, and feel ready for the rest of the session. So that's a practice that y'all could do every day. That would be perfect, but it's also something that maybe we could practice whenever, particularly whenever we're feeling really anxious. It just somehow helps us to stop and pause. So hopefully you've got something to take back with you in terms of a practice. So on that note, on that very, very apt note, it's time for me to introduce our lovely, lovely panelist. What we're going to be doing is I'm just going to be asking each of them to just take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. And of course, because this is a panel discussion, I will be stopping to share my screen, and we would love it if you all can have your cameras on for the next half an hour while we are in that panel discussion, but completely okay if that's not something that you're comfortable with. And give me a second, I've got too lost with my mindfulness practice. There are people waiting in the waiting room. Right. So first up, so I'm going to ask each of them to just share a few words about themselves. So first up, we have Elizabeth Wright, who is a Paralympic medalist. She's a writer, speaker, and disability consultant. And I'm going to find it very hard to call her Elizabeth. So Liz, would you like to share something a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, that's fine. All my friends call me Liz, so everyone here can call me Liz. That's fine.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Minoti, so much for inviting me to take part today. I'm really excited to take part because I generally never get to talk about this stuff. Most of the time, I talk about the bigger stuff that I've kind of set out and achieved, which, you know, in terms of introducing myself, as you can tell by the accent, I'm Australian. A bit of an interloper here. I've lived here for 10 years, but when I was a teenager, I was a Paralympic swimmer, and I swam for Australia at the 1996 Atlanta Paralympic Games and the Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games. And I walked away with 2 bronze medals and a silver medal, which was absolutely flipping amazing. Completely unexpected and absolutely amazing. And since then I've had a very strange and meandering career. So in my 20s I did 2 fine art degrees and was an exhibiting artist, and then I moved to the UK, and that's when I started doing a lot more speaking work, speaking in schools and organisations about the Paralympics, about goal setting and all that stuff. But more recently, I've been doing a lot more disability activism and disability consultancy. I think as inclusion and diversity becomes more and more important, there's kind of this need out there for specifically trainers who in the disability awareness realm who have a disability and can kind of talk about that lived experience. So that's a very quick overview of who I am and where I'm at today.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Liz. And you make it sound so simple. You know, I just went on and won like 2 medals. And,
it was easy.
But it's absolutely amazing to have you here, and you know how I think I have a girl crush on you.
Well, I have a girl crush on you too, Minoti. You're awesome.
So inspirational. And of course, we've got Anne Chanda, another phenomenal woman. Anne, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
So, hi everyone, I'm Anne Chanda and I'm the founder of Inspiring Women Changemakers. I've worked in social impact and inclusion since about 2003, and before that I had a completely different career in IT sales between London and Germany. I moved back to Leeds in 2003, but it was in about 2014 that my life really changed when I led a Change.org campaign on behalf of an asylum seeker. Her 2 girls were at risk of female genital mutilation if they were reported, and it was something I'd just started campaigning on at the time after starting to follow some amazing legal professionals and campaigners. Long and short was my Change.org campaign went crazy. I got 126,500 signatures. Various playwrights, directors, politicians, and even Richard Branson right at the end got involved and took interest in the case. It was a very high profile time. It was also a very stressful and exhausting time. So this subject of mindfulness is really important to me because I've had to practice it through my whole life and my career, and particularly as a change maker. You're subject to trolling, journalists grilling you, all sorts of things, and the pressures of just getting things done alongside doing your day job. So the day job, really briefly, when I did my campaign, I think the whole success of it, the reason it became so big, were the amazing professional, mostly women and some men that were around me. So a couple of years later, when I'd reflected on what made that work and some of the skills that I brought in for myself to be able to keep that going and liaise with the media and lobby politicians, brought about Inspiring Women Change Makers. So through that, we give change makers the skills, the contacts and the platform to make change. So what that looks like is, if you've got a social mission, I help bring the people and the skills around you to amplify that at scale if that's what you want, or if you're interested in a subject and want to learn more, again, to connect you to change makers that are taking action. Liz and Minoti are both members. Liz, particularly with her disability activism work, is just making me so proud because she's gaining even more recognition above and beyond her Paralympic journey, but as a real expert in disability awareness in her own right. So I invite you to check that out. We've got a website, Inspiring Women Changemakers, got a Facebook group, anyone's welcome to join that. And I look forward to speaking to you all a bit more on mindfulness shortly.
Brilliant, Ange. And I think Ange is one of those very inspirational ladies who you just need to know. You need to know Ange Honda because she can help you in so many ways that I don't think one call will be enough to share how much you can help everyone. And of course, last but definitely not the least, we've got Minoti Parikh, who is a communication manager with Yorkshire Building Society and is also a Lean and Lead steering group member. Lauren, great to have you here, and do you want to just share a little bit more about you?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So I'm Lauren, and as Minoti says, I am a part of the Lean and Lead steering group. For my day job, I work in communications and PR for a Yorkshire Building Society. So we do a lot of stuff around financial well-being and financial inclusion, and raising awareness around homelessness. And awareness around how important it is to have a place to call home. Before I worked in comms and kind of reputation management and brand management, I was a journalist for many years. So I was a eventually business editor. And again, it's kind of similar to Minoti. It's a very stressful job when you work in journalism, and that was kind of, I had some sort of serious life changes going on around that time. And that was how I became interested in mindfulness. And it's really, really nice actually to get to talk about this, because I think, as Liz said, it's not something you get to talk about a lot, but I think it's something that's really beneficial to everyone who practices it. And there's many, many ways, many aspects to it, and many ways to kind of practice it. So I think it's a really, really excited to be on this panel.
Yeah, no, absolutely excited to have you here as well. And of course, at this point, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, so we're all going to magically appear on the screen together. Haha. and we're going to get this going. If y'all want to just get on to speaker view, on the right hand side of your screen there is an option of gallery view or speaker view. So if you want to get onto speaker so we can all see each other and make this as interactive and engaging as possible. So first up, I think I want to start off by obviously asking the very basic question to Liz, Ange, and Lauren, that what do you think is mindfulness? Ange, do you want to give it a go?
To me, mindfulness is any practice that gets rid of the noise. So all that stuff going through our head that you mentioned during the exercise, what am I making for dinner? Oh my goodness, I've got this many emails to check. Mindfulness to me is being really in the present. You know, no other distractions, or even if they come, the way I see it is they're like feathers in the wind. So they're blowing by, but I don't have to grab them and place an attachment on them.
Wow, that's such a creative way of sharing what mindfulness is. Lauren, do you want to add?
Yeah, so I would totally agree with that. I think it's about being present and concentrating and being involved in what you're actually doing, as opposed to thinking about stuff that's happened in the past or worrying about things that are going to happen in the future. And I'd use kind of quite a similar analogy to Ange's analogy, and just say that I kind of see it as it's almost like you're sitting by the side of a road and you're watching the cars, but you're not chasing after any of them or trying to, you know, reach any of them. It's just about enjoying the moment and the scenery.
Wow, y'all have got some amazing interpretations. Now I'm like, I should have probably thought about this a little more. Liz, what is your lovely interpretation?
Oh my God, well, I don't know how I can go after Ange and Lauren. So they basically summed it up. I think the only thing I could think to add to that would be, for me, it's about flow. It's when I think of flow, you know, when you kind of are involved in something or so absorbed in something that time just suddenly, you know, you can look up and suddenly hours have gone by because you've been so absorbed in that particular activity or something like that. And it used to happen at swimming when I was a teenager, and I'd be 2.5 hours in the pool and it would just go like that because you focus solely on that particular activity. And I find that the same can happen. It's nice to lose yourself in something, especially if it's something that you really enjoy. And I feel that kind of really helps you be really present and mindful. So
I think the beauty of mindfulness is that there is no right and wrong. It's just your own interpretation of what gives you peace, what helps you relax. And I think one of the reasons for having this panel discussion, like Lauren, you mentioned, that it's an interesting topic, but not many people discuss it because somehow there's a lot of somehow there's this whole myth around mindfulness is about meditating and being silent in this one corner and all of that. And hopefully through this panel discussion and through this session, we're able to break a couple of these myths and actually help people to realize that they probably are practicing it, but they're just not aware about it. So of course, we're talking here about creative ways of practicing it. And I would love to know, as well as I'm sure the participants would love to know, what is the passion or what is your hobby that has helped you tap into that space? Liz, do you want to go? Because I know yours is very, I'm dying to learn.
Well, you've benefited. You have benefited from my hobby. You asked me to speak about two particular things, Minoti, in light of this. I'll talk about, well, actually, to be fair, both of them really started in childhood. So I'm going to talk about my piano playing and also my crafting and in particular knitting. So for me, it's like I grew up with in a very crafty family, and we had a piano in our family as well, because my sister was trying to learn piano, but she never really followed through. But I loved, you know, as a kid getting on and like plonk, 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 plonk on the keys kind of thing. And so they're two, like, it's kind of something that I grew up with and that I think I associate with comfort and contentment. And so they're things, especially when I am stressed or wanting to look after my mental health, they're things that really help me manage that and take me away from the kind of everyday stresses of life and stuff like that. So yeah, so I kind of do a lot of knitting, although at the moment I'm doing a lot more cross stitch at the moment. I think it's a bit too hot to kind of be doing knitting, but generally, yeah, it's like I've got to have something on the go all the time that I can do at the end of the day, or have something to look forward to at the end of the day that's completely separate to work. And with piano, I've been learning piano for the past 3-4 years now, and it's something that I look forward to. Like my piano lesson every week is something that I really look forward to. It's almost like, you know, especially if it's a tough week, it's like, right, I know that at the end of the week I've got piano lesson and it's time for me that is completely, you know, it's only half an hour long, but it's completely solidly, I say there in the diary, I am supposed to be on piano lesson in about half an hour, so I've had to change it today. But it's something that is normally solidly, you know, it's there and I know that it's coming. And so if I'm having a really stressful week, I know that something really delightful and fun and pleasant is coming for me to do. So it's that kind of thing of practicing those things as a mindfulness activity, but it's something that I really find joy in at the same time.
Brilliant. And Lauren, you've got a very interesting passion as well, which I absolutely suck at, but do you want to share your passion?
Yeah, sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat this morning. Yeah, so I bake, and it's quite a similar experience to Liz, actually, in some ways. It was something that I did when I was a child with my grandma, and I sort of rediscovered baking probably about 4 or 5 years ago. But I actually really enjoy it, and it's one of those activities where it's got this nice combination of being quite precise. You have to concentrate on what you're doing, but it's also quite creative at the same time. So I find it really helpful in terms of it's something to do with your hands. It's something which is completely different from what I do during the week and on a day-to-day basis. And I think, you know, it's really interesting in terms of, you know, how you can change recipes, how you can make things a bit different. I started actually baking bread probably about 2 years ago, and I'd never actually done that before. I'd never made bread with my mum or my grandma before when I was a child, and I found that particularly is quite helpful for mindfulness, because you're kneading and you've got that very sort of real sensory connection to what you're doing. So yeah, I tend to do it not quite as regimented as Liz with how I do it. I tend to do it more on a weekend, but I don't have a set pattern. But again, it is something that I, particularly if I've had a stressful week, I look forward to, and I just really enjoy it.
Yeah. Ange?
I should start by saying Liz also bakes. She's a crazy master baker. We get to, Minoti and I are going to get to enjoy those tomorrow as well. My thing that I've got a couple of passions really. That one of them is gardening or plants in general, and just being around nature. So you can see behind me here a few of my lovely house plants. I might introduce you to a few of them. Look, here's one. So yeah, I think for me, getting soil under my fingernails and just being in the mud, whether it's through walking. I love a few people on the chat mentioned walking, but it's the smell, the sounds, the just feeling part of something bigger for me is why I love gardening, hiking, and everything to do with nature, really. So lockdown's been a really interesting time. Behind my house, I have quite a long bridle way, which is private for residents, and the length of my garden belongs to me. So that's kept me so fit mentally and physically throughout lockdown, because it was overgrown with brambles, particularly on my neighbour's side. I had her permission, and I've created this beautiful like wildflower oasis. We've got huge poppies and geranium and all sorts, all the length up, and it's inspired the neighbours to get involved. Some have done the veggie patches, they've at least pruned the trees and things. So the community spirit that's brought has been great. But I also went from, I think, 1 feeder to 6. So I've got goldfinches, coal tits, you know, all the fledglings. We've got birds that I've never seen around our garden before. So green finches and long-tailed tits, all these really cute birds visiting the garden. So it's amazing what you can do in such a short space of time. And my mindfulness, it's been quite a busy period. I was bereaved at the weekend, and for me to go out into the garden, you know, either with a cup of tea in the morning or a glass of wine in the evening, and watch those birds on the feeder, or do some potting. You know, I was potting in the garden at 9 o'clock last night, and it's just such a wonderful thing for me that I would do in all kinds of weather.
And I love the fact that how something that you're so passionate about has actually led others to join in as well and do their little bit and just feel the magic, feel the connection.
Well, I've got quite a following on Instagram now. So if you follow Chandra on Insta, there's all these people saying, how do I do this? Or what's the name of this thing?
You become a garden consultant. That's a thing.
You know, hey, why not?
So before I move on to asking our next question, I just want to quickly say that if y'all do have any questions for our panelists, or just questions in general that y'all want to ask, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. Hopefully we will be able to take them up a little later through the session. But next up, I think, you know, we're talking about passion and we're talking about what mindfulness is. It'll be nice to know, what is it that you feel when you practice it? And more importantly, what is it that you feel when you're not able to practice it? Lauren, do you want to get a start on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think my other half definitely notices when I don't practice it, because I tend to get quite grumpy and irritated. I have I've had in the past, so the original reason that I started to do mindfulness, is probably quite a good time to explain this. My dad died in 2013, and that was when I started practicing mindfulness, because it was a really stressful time. I had like really high levels of anxiety, and I was seeing a therapist, and she suggested to me that it might be something that would help me with my anxiety and help me to sleep better. So I started doing mindfulness. I think I used an app. I think it was Headspace originally, that was the app that I was using. So I did it in a really sort of formal way, meditation, and that really sort of worked for that period. But once I started doing it in a formal way, I found that it sort of applies to other things in your life as well. And it is, you know, once you start understanding more about it and understand how it feels when you are meditating, that does actually help you be mindful in other areas too. So I think, just to get back to the original question, how it feels to me, I think it makes me feel calmer, it makes me feel more focused. It definitely does things like improve your sleep. And it just makes you, so the things which would irritate me sort of on a normal day, if I've not practiced mindfulness, don't irritate me. I find it easier to be, I guess, a bit calm about things, not overreact. And I think it just gives you emotional stability. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. And a real sort of sense of, for me as well, a sense of peace and a sense of calm, which is really important. You know, if you don't practice it, again, it's the opposite. You can find yourself getting more irritated by things which really, you know, sometimes aren't that important. Less focus, you know, feeling more emotional about things. So I think, you know, it's really important to give yourself sort of a sense of center, a sense of peace, and a sense of calm, I would say.
Liz, your thoughts?
For me, when I'm I think for both activities, you know, or you know, I'm going to talk about, say, crafting in general. For me, it's just about the joy that I get. I think I've always been such a creative person, you know, from childhood. I was constantly drawing, I was constantly wanting to make stuff, and I kind of went through a phase where I wasn't really doing it that much. And so it almost feels like when I am doing craft, or when I am playing the piano, or when I'm reading a book or something, you know, all these kind of creative, curious kind of things and approaches to life and activities, I feel like I'm coming back to myself, like my center, I think. And that's calming in a way, because you're reminding yourself that this is who I am, this is what I find joy in. And I think especially when you are stressed out, or feeling anxious about something, you can forget you can forget who is kind of really your identity, how you see yourself. And so I think kind of these activities just help me center that and come back to, oh yes, this is me, and there's joy inside of me and happiness and contentment. It's there, and I can find it through these activities.
And what do you think? I mean, you are quite I would say that you're pretty focused in terms of what gives you that peace and that space. But what have you felt when you don't practice it, or practice that?
I think the thing is, I do practice it every day. Even in winter, I will go outside in my garden in the morning with a cup of tea. I open my window every day to let old energy out, new energy in. But I want to address a question, if I can, by Annabelle, because I think it's a great one. She said, do you need to be doing an activity to be mindful? And personally, I don't believe you do. So a really simple practice that I do in the garden when I take my cup of tea is, you know, some breath work similar to the one you did. Just take my cup of tea, cradle it, feel the warmth, sip it slowly and mindfully. This tea's cold now, so I can't demonstrate, but it's really anything that, even focus on the very small things. So sometimes I focus on the leaf of a plant, or I'm watching a bee or something like that. Whereas when I do an activity, that's equally as mindful. So it might be digging and then I lose track of time, or chopping down brambles. But also when I'm painting, because the other thing is I love to paint, and I especially love to paint outside barefoot in the garden. So you don't have to be in it. What works one day might not work the next day. It might be a completely different form. So the days I'm exhausted, it might just be sitting down and watching the birds. And then a day I have a burst of energy, it's right, let's go and dig out this plot now. So it really depends on the situation.
And I think Lauren and I were discussing when we spoke about how mindfulness has helped, especially during this phase, this entire lockdown phase. So Lauren, you mentioned that it's helped you in many ways. Do you want to share a little bit about this last few months?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that there's been, well, COVID-19 generally, I think, has probably increased everyone's levels of anxiety, and being isolated or not seeing people socially is really difficult. And it's, you know, in some ways, you know, there's upsides to it, and it's really lovely to be at home and have more time with your family. But at the same time, it does make things a bit more difficult. And it does, I think it's put a stress probably on everyone's mental health.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, mindfulness in the last few months has probably been more important to me than it would be normally. But it's also had the upside that I've had more time to do activities which help me to be mindful. So I'm kind of similar to Angie in that I also like, I'm very sort of in tune with nature, and I get a lot out of it. I think you know, there is something really about being outside, and I think she put it beautifully when she said, and having like dirt under your fingernails, it really does connect you with, you know, it makes you realise that you're part of something bigger. So what we've been doing, we've been going for lots of walks. We've been doing gardening. The garden's probably never looked better. We've planted quite a lot of, we've got some tomato plants behind me, so we've planted quite a lot of vegetables, and we're growing quite a lot of things. But I've also had time to sort of bake more, and we're making sort of all of our own bread at the moment. So I'm not buying bread at all. I'm just making it and baking it. And it's given me a chance to do some things that I probably wouldn't have baked previously. So things like naan bread, we would normally just buy those. And I've tried them before, and they've turned out terribly. Like, they've just sort of been like frisbees, really hard and rubbery. But this time we've managed to sort of master them. I do feel like, you know, when you manage to do something like that, it's a little achievement, but it's really nice to sit down and eat something that you've made from scratch.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess there's been both kind of, I guess, during lockdown for me, the need to do it more, but also the opportunity to do it more. So I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about mindfulness, and when we talk about it, there's a lot of we talk about it as a personal space, in terms of it helps with our personal well-being, it helps us feel better, feel more grateful, but it also has a massive impact on our professional space, and how we build relations, how we speak with our clients, build businesses, or just, go about with our day-to-day stuff. So what have you all felt in terms of your direct impact of your practicing, whatever your interpretation of mindfulness is? How has that directly impacted your productivity or just your professional space in general? Liz, do you want to share something on this?
I think for me, it's, especially in light of say with lockdown and stuff like that, it's enabled me to have perhaps a bit more structure in my day, and keeping that rhythm and pattern of stuff happening, because I think we can all agree that change scares all of us, and when we're having to change the way that we actually perhaps work, or engage with people, or even socialize with people and stuff like that, it can be really scary and make you anxious. And I think for me, in terms of work, it's not much has changed. And I think Angie and I often say this to people in light of the way we work. A lot of the work we do is from home anyway, outside of lockdown. But I think for me, having time to craft and play the piano and do these things has just helped to build in even more of a structure to my day. So like I said earlier, I know that in the evening I can sit down and perhaps put a silly show on the TV in the background or something, and just sit there and do my knitting or my cross stitch or whatever. And it's something that I can just look forward to at the end of the day, knowing that I've got this work to do. Not saying that I hate my work, like I love the work that I do, but it's that thing external from that. And I think that's important to have, especially in light of what's happening right now with the pandemic, is that having that thing other than just like, well, in home I'm now doing work. It's like, well, no, actually I've got these other things that I enjoy and can focus on.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of balance. And I think sometimes what does happen with, even if you do like 5 or 10 minutes, like even if I dance for even 5 minutes, I feel the problems that I feel are massive just seem very just seem that I can deal with them after given those few minutes yourself.
It's funny you saying that, like just doing 5 minutes of dancing. Sometimes if I'm here working on something, and then I'm like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, and my bedroom's next to the bathroom, and that's where my keyboard is, so I'll dash up, go to the bathroom, and then I might think, oh, I'll just go in and just play that song for like 2 minutes, and I'll go and play a song, and then I'm like, okay, that's enough, and then come back down and do some work. And I think it is just having that option to maybe you just need that. And I think maybe that's checking in with your gut as well, of like, what do I need right in this moment? Because maybe you need that outburst of creativity, or to get out into the garden for 5 minutes, or listen to a podcast for a few minutes, or put some music on, or whatever it may be, that just helps to restart that motivation for work as well. So just kind of tapping into what you need in that moment.
And absolutely agree. And I know from knowing Ange that you have, in your day-to-day, there's no like a fix, this is how my everyday is. But at the same time, I also know that, there will be many like you in this session who will be dealing with a lot of people on a day-to-day basis, and no two people's problems or situations are the same. So you're multitasking, but at a whole new level, because you need to kind of keep your emotional radar in control and kind of show up every time. So how do you think, gardening or just stepping out, painting has helped you bring that energy back and sort of show up on a day-to-day basis?
Without a doubt, I think in combination with personal boundaries, because you can only give so much. And I think there's been a lot of conversation in the chat about people struggling to sleep. I've struggled with sleep since, well, I haven't struggled with sleep, I just have erratic sleep patterns. I don't sleep very much, wake up early. That's not the thing that tends to impact my energy. But I think particularly with lockdown, and one thing we should address, since we've got the safe space, is there will be some days where you feel on it and you're motivated, and then it can be a longer period, a day or even more, that you just feel like doing nothing and you're super tired, because we're going through a collective, you know, change process and a grieving in a way. So acknowledging that and giving yourself permission to stop, because I mean, Minoti, you and Liz both know that when I'm on it, I churn out content like some kind of content creation machine, and, you know, able to have lots of conversations. So the last 2 days I've been absolutely buzzing, and I've had great conversations. I've been sorting out all these things, but at the weekend I lost my auntie. I was flat and I couldn't do anything. So I was in my garden, had to walk. I'm going for a walk this afternoon, and giving ourselves that time and space to do either the creative pursuits, just stop and rest, even if it's sitting on the sofa and watching something rubbish on telly, as Liz said, you know, give yourself permission to do that. And I think even sitting on the sofa can be mindful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've got one last question, but I'm going to first check if we've got any questions from our lovely participants. Zoe, do we have any questions we need to look at?
Yes. So initially, I think Anne's touched on one of the questions by Cheryl. So Cheryl initially asked, as women who seem to have to multitask more naturally and frequently, as a gender group, are we potentially less mindful?
Very interesting question. And Liz, Lorraine, anybody?
So I would say, actually, if you have to multitask, being more mindful is really helpful, because it enables you to, well, I find it enables me to focus better and to really focus on what I'm supposed to be doing at that time. And I do think that you can multitask in a way which means that you're doing it without having to switch between tasks really quickly. So I think what I would say is, I think it's probably more important if you're multitasking and you're busy, creating that, as Ange said, beautifully put actually, that time and that space for yourself is really important, because you know, we're not machines. We can't just be continually on the go. You have to take time out for yourself. And we talk a lot about being kind to other people, but mindfulness, really, it's ultimately about being kind to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Ange, do you want to add, or have you already answered?
No, I haven't. I said great question because I was thinking on it, and in part Lauren's set up what I was going to say really nicely. To be mindful is to be focused, and you can multitask, but there's a lot of research out there that shows your productivity hugely declines if you're flitting between tasks because of your concentration levels. So the way I've worked for years, and I don't know where this came from, I just have this weird Virgo mind, is I look at things in 15-minute chunks of time. So if I'm doing a newsletter, I think, well, that's going to take me 3 chunks of 15 minutes. And then I kind of give myself a 15-minute chunk of free time, or to go and get a cup of tea. And that's what enables me to be productive. One of the things you might want to look at is the Pomodoro Technique. I'll type it into chat, but you can buy these little timers and it sets an alarm for 25 minutes. So you set that off and then do your work, have a pause, come back to it. So if it's not to say that you shouldn't multitask, but just focus on the thing you need to get done before you move on to the next one in the day, and really allocate your day in that way. And I've always found that hugely helps my productivity.
And Minoti, I think like I agree with what Lauren and Ange have said completely, and I've used the Pomodoro technique before. But I think this idea of multitasking also links into a question or a statement that Josie said, which was about she feels guilty when she's not working. And I think that can be a big issue. I mean, I feel overwhelmed a lot when I have a lot of work on, and can then end up feeling guilty if I'm taking time to look after my mental health and well-being. And I think for me, a very simple solution that instantly takes away, and it might not work for everyone, but it instantly takes away anxiety for me, is literally just a to-do list. I literally just get all of that work that's in my head out of my head, because you know, when you're working on something else, you could be thinking like, oh, but I've got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to do this. But if you actually take it out of your head and put it in a to-do list, you can just then let that go and forget about it and focus on what you have to do then. And it literally takes away that overwhelm, especially when you start ticking stuff off and you start feeling a bit more accomplished and you're like, wow, actually I am getting a lot more work done a lot quicker than I thought that I actually would. And I think in doing that, for me as well, doing a to-do list, it almost gives me permission to then step away occasionally to go play some piano or do some craft or get out in the garden or read my book, because I know that what I have to do is still there. It's still there. It's not me constantly worrying and thinking about, oh my gosh, I have to do this and I have to do that. It's written down. It's safe. I can forget about it for the time being.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you mentioned that, because I love to-do lists. I have lots of to-do lists, but I think I've struggled on days where I feel like, you know, I just cannot be bothered to look at the to-do list because I'm just feeling so overwhelmed with things that I've not done. And it's amazing what a 5-minute you know, just outside standing in the balcony can do. That it can just help you kind of come back and be like, okay, it's not going to eat you. Just look at the to-do list, you know, just remind yourself what is most important out of it. So taking that time out so that you can show up fully when you are in the time in is you know, such a massive, can make such a massive difference. Zoe, do we have any other questions? Because I'm conscious of the time.
So in terms of other questions, let me just double check here. So we've got quite a few statements. Josie uses the colouring app on her phone. Xandra started with nostalgia, excuse me, listening to music from her childhood. That's something that definitely works for me too. We've got Claire mentioning walking, and so is Annabelle, and Helen's mentioned cycling. From the anchor, it was the question mostly on sleep and the idea of breathing techniques working during the day. But in terms of at nighttime, what's the best way of honing in on that mindfulness?
Ladies.
So, sorry, I think preparing yourself for sleep is really important. So I've struggled with sleep, and I had a phase where I was just basically waking up in the middle of the night at sort of, I think 4 or 5 in the morning, couldn't get back to sleep, which obviously isn't great. So I think if you can do things like make sure that you've established a really good bedtime routine, I would say switch your screens off probably an hour or 2 before you go to bed, and try and do something which isn't screen related. So no computer, definitely no social media, don't watch the news. I think people have mentioned this in the comments actually. Watching the news before bed is probably not a good idea. I would maybe even not watch TV if you're struggling. I would maybe try and do something like an activity like reading, or if you craft, that would be really helpful, I think, as well. And then I would just sort of wind down, maybe do a stretching routine before you go to bed. Try and relax like the big muscles in your legs and your bottom, because that's quite helpful. That will help you relax overall. And then maybe try and do a breathing exercise before you go to sleep. And that should, I think if you can establish a routine, you can do that over, you know, a couple of weeks, that will help your body to understand that it's sleep time and you're ready for sleep, and unwind your mind as well.
Okay, brilliant. And Oliz, any bedtime routines that you'll follow?
I'm going to be controversial because I've already talked about the fact I've had strange sleep patterns for years, and so I've read a lot of the research about it, and this notion that you have to have 7 to 8 hours of sleep is actually been busted. It's a myth. So it doesn't work for me. I don't feel great. So last night I went to bed about midnight and I've been up since 5. So but then there were other days. So there've been other days this week where I've had a soak at 8. I've gone to bed at 11, and then I haven't woken up until nearly 8 o'clock. So you know, I just personally, I don't beat myself up about it, because if I woke up stressing at 4 o'clock that I was not asleep, I'd wind myself up and I wouldn't be able to sleep at all. So you've got, I just think, tune in. We don't tune into our bodies enough. You know, I read this great thing back in 2013, and it was some research of 64 top global executives. And the thing they all had in common was that they meditated for at least 12 minutes a day in some form. So they had some form of mindfulness. And that they clocked off work-wise at 6 and spent time with their family or friends, and that they did some form of exercise. And, you know, their sleep patterns did vary, but the other advice they gave was go with your own waves of energy. And that was a revelation for me. That's changed the way I've operated since 2013, because I used to be so unkind to myself about the fact that I had weird sleeping patterns. Yeah. And now I've just realized it's okay because they're mine.
Yeah. And thank you so much, ladies. And I hope we've kind of summed up in terms of taking up all the questions. I have one final question for all three of you, and that is for anybody who does not know what mindfulness is, or might have certain preconceived notions about it. What would you tell them to make it simpler for them, so that they can, just with baby steps, just start realizing what their intention around mindfulness is, and just give them that sort of an initial push? What's your very simple tip?
Mine would just be it doesn't have to be meditation. I know that for a lot of people meditation can be really hard, and it can almost have the opposite effect of the intention of it to calm you down. It's I've read stories where people have been like, my anxiety has gone higher, and I've had panic attacks and stuff like that when I've tried to meditate. So kind of, what I suggest to people is just find something that you enjoy doing, whether it's something as simple as just sitting there and reading a book, or listening to a podcast, or playing music, or baking, or gardening, or whatever it is, and just giving yourself that intention that I'm going to do that for at least 10 minutes each day. And that's it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to cost money. It doesn't have to be what's trendy at the moment. It's whatever you find joy in, and just focusing on that for at least 10 minutes a day.
Absolutely. Lauren?
So I would say, and I think this kind of relates back to what Liz said about people, when they try and sit and meditate, they feel like they're not doing it right, and that causes more anxiety. I would say don't worry about how good you are at it. The main thing is, it's like Liz says, that it's something that you enjoy, something that you find joy in. Just choose something you find joy in, and commit to doing, but fully commit your attention to that thing for a set period of time, and try and do it every day. And I think that is just really kind of the simplest way of kind of getting into mindfulness. And if you want to try meditation, just try it. Try sitting for 10 minutes. There's loads of apps out there which have it. Have meditation on them, and that you can usually sort of get a free trial of them. So try sitting for 10 minutes and just see how you find it, but don't put pressure on yourself to be good at it. I think that's the main thing, really.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd just say, don't let judgment get in the way of mindfulness, either your own judgment about what mindfulness should look like, because there's no shoulds about it. As Lauren and Liz both said, it's what gives you pleasure. And if, do what brings you pleasure on that day, in that moment. And it, as I said earlier, it might look different the next day, but just take that time to give yourself those moments of peace or joy in whatever way feels right at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so very much, Liz, Ange, and Lauren. That was absolutely inspirational and phenomenal. Big round of applause to all three of you. I think when you've rightly summed it up, Ange, in terms of do what gives you pleasure. So I think what we would like to do now is just to take a minute right now to think about what makes us happy. And after you've given yourself those few seconds to think about that, it would be lovely for us to then think about, if you had to describe what happiness looks like to you by using a fruit, a bird, a plant, a food item, a meal, a city, a place. what would that look like and why? And if I could request you all to put your answers in the chat box. Just that 1 minute for yourself, for you to think about what happiness means to you and how would you describe it. Where are our, yes. The smell of mountain air. Ah, love that. Sky. Sat in the countryside looking at a beautiful view. Brilliant. Sorry. Listening to music, beautiful beach, being in a forest, calmness. My baby snoring softly. Yeah, that. You completely agree with that, Bhavisha. Sea, river, lake. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for sharing what happiness looks like. And I think the second part of this little activity is, remember in the description of the event, we spoke about doing a bit of dance as well. So because I've already written it, I need to kind of stick to the brief, or the other members of the Lean-In group are not going to be very happy with it. but what I would love to do is just possibly introduce a few Indian classical, movements inspired by Indian classical dance. They're not as technical and as difficult as you would imagine. They're very easy, and we're just going to do this just for our own happiness, just to probably look at it as a small little window to Indian culture. So what we're going to do is, I've thought of a poem, and I've thought of showing that poem to you through movement. So we're going to then break it out line after line and do it all together. And promise you it's going to be fun. And please just feel free to, again, there's no right and wrong. Just feel free to do as much or as little as you like. But it's purely just for your joy and just purely for you to learn something new, possibly. So the poem is, I am as resilient as earth. I am as fluid as water. I am as powerful as fire. I am filled with infinite possibilities, and I bring joy to the lives of others every day. And how we're going to do this through movement is something like this. So I am as resilient as earth. So if I could get all of y'all to just place your hands on your opposite elbows. So I am as resilient as earth. Brilliant. I am as fluid as water. Nice. I am as powerful as fire. So if you could get our tip of our thumbs to the tip of our index fingers, and imagine we are drawing flicks of fire. So I am as powerful as fire. Brilliant. I am filled with infinite opportunities. So just creating the space above us and looking above at the ceiling, you're filled with infinite possibilities. And I bring joy. So it's like a smile on the face. I bring joy to the lives of others. So we're going to do a thumbs up, and then we're going to do our palms below that. So this signifies, in Indian dance, this signifies giving something precious. So I bring joy to the lives of others. So you're almost imagining that you're forwarding it on to the rest of us in this space. Brilliant. So shall we all do this one more time? And even if you're on mute, it's absolutely fine, but it would be nice if you can say the poem along as well. So let's all give it a go. I am as resilient as earth. Brilliant. I am as fluid as water. I am as powerful as fire. I am filled with infinite possibilities. And I bring joy to the lives of others every day. Yay, brilliant. Y'all have officially completed your foundation course in Indian classical dance. Don't tell my teacher that. All right, on that note, we're just going to quickly get y'all all into a couple of breakout rooms where we would love you to discuss. We will be putting the questions in the chat box, but we would love you to discuss what is it that you practice and what is it that has resonated most with you through this day. And if there's anything else you would like to discuss, please feel free. That's your couple of minutes to yourselves. This little poem that I've just shared and this little exercise, if it's something that connected with you, please feel free to use it as your daily mindfulness practice. Or if it's just something that you want to use to show off your skills at Indian dance, please feel free to do that as well. So right now, if I could ask Zoe to please get us into breakout rooms. I'm going to be putting the questions in the chat box anyway. And if you all could then just assign one volunteer in your groups to just feedback into the main room, that would be brilliant as well. Zoe, are we all okay?
Perfect. We're ready to go? Okay, so I'll just create the rooms now. Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's any feedback that you would like to share from your little breakout rooms, we would be more than happy to hear them.
I'm happy to share.
Anyone?
What?
Yeah, sure.
I'm happy to share. Yeah, so we were in breakout room 2, and there was 4 of us. One of the things that really seemed to connect mindfulness for us, and we noticed it in the chat group as well, which was incredible, was that everybody seems to have this collective sense towards nature. And we've all identified that one way or another, being outside in nature really helps us connect with our mindfulness and connect with our sort of inner purpose and how we feel about things. We did go off on a complete tangent, but it was wonderful about how what matters to us is protecting that environment as well. And in a few, we discussed that we're keen litter pickers. It seems that we all go out in our different ways and protect our environment and create a community environment so that we're giving back. So that was really nice to feel that we had that connection. We also talked about, which again has been touched on in this group, how you should go back to what you enjoyed as a child, because that's where your natural joy is. So we had reading, reading, gardening, baking, cooking, the things that we've talked about, but where there was no sort of expectation on you apart from just to be happy. As a child, that's all our parents ever want and our family want. So what we did as a child is probably what makes us happy. So go back and think about that and go and do it. That's where we got to, really. So thank you.
Wow. No, thank you so much for sharing, Cheryl. And absolutely 100% agree. It's funny how there's so much joy in what we did as kids, and we tend to forget it with all the burdens of life. Anybody else would like to share some feedback before we do our closing slides? Yes, Claire.
Hello. So we talked a lot about how wonderful being in flow feels, and just the pure joy and the energy you get from doing something that you love. You forget where you are, you forget what time it is, and you're just completely absorbed and enjoying it. Yep.
Absolutely. So thank you very, very much, ladies, for all your participation. And we would just like to close by just sharing a few more details about Lean and Leeds and how you can connect with us and what we have in store for the rest of the year. So I'm going to hand it back to Zoe, who can hopefully see my screen now.
I can, thank you. So thank you so much for your engagement with this topic. We're really glad that we've been able to give you this safe space and this dedicated time to be mindful in our busy lives. So we would obviously like to continue the conversation and make sure that you have this space should you want to share any further techniques with the circle or the attendees of this meeting. So the best way to stay in touch is to join the Lean in Leeds circle on the leanin.org website. So we do have an overarching Lean in Leeds network, and we do have a Lean in Leeds circle that you can join. From there, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at leaninleeds@gmail.com, and we'll try to get back to you. Another thing to mention is we are on pretty much every social media platform at Lean in Leeds. So we're obviously on Facebook, where you'll be able to link in with other members of the community. And we're also on Eventbrite, so this is where you will have found our events. And actually, yes, we're going to the next slide, Minoti, thank you. We actually do have an agenda with our upcoming events, so you can see just on screen here, we have events running up to December. So we will be periodically releasing these onto Eventbrite, but you can follow us on Eventbrite in order to get these notifications when one of our events has been published.
Yep.
So I'd just like to say thank you again so much for joining our breakfast club. We do have evening events, but these do tend to be more collaborative sessions, I believe I would say, more intimate. So please do keep an eye out on Eventbrite and be sure to follow us and continue this conversation offline. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Zoe, and thank you once again, Liz, Ange, and Noreen, for your incredible thoughts and time. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us, and hopefully you'll have a lovely, positive day ahead and weekend ahead. Shall we just all close by doing our final movement of sharing joy with others? Right, so can we just think of the last line of the poem and just let's all remind ourselves that we bring joy to the lives of others and ourselves. And today we're going to be mindful about the joy we bring. So I bring joy to the lives of others every day. And some joy to yourself as well. Thank you very, very much for joining us. You all have been absolutely brilliant. See you. Take care.